Welcome to another episode of California Triathlon Soup. I'm Tom Richmond, and today we have Cam Wurf, the Australian triathlete, cyclist, rower, and overall Uber athlete. Cam, welcome to California Triathlon Soup.
Yeah, it's pretty. California's a place I've spent quite a bit of time, and it's sort of the catalyst area that set me on this latest journey into triathlon with Oceanside being the first one that I did a few years back. So yeah, great to be on your show.
We have less of a show and more of a 10-person listening tour, including family members. I'm hoping that you pass this along to your friends and family. We can get that up to a couple dozen, maybe.
I understand where you're coming from with that, because the only reason I started writing a blog was so that I didn't have to explain to my mum what happened in bike races. She could just read about it. And so much stuff goes on in a bike race, and she can't understand why you came 175th one day and 5th the next and 48th the next day. And it was easier to tell the story and then kept her up to date, and of course the family members. So I'm with you on this one.
You did some really good blogging. I'd looked at some of the stuff you had done with Chris Horner. You were interviewing athletes in the pack a few years back. You were sort of outing Chris as a candy-eating athlete. Is that who you pick to ride with when you ride? Who has the best food?
Back in those days, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it wasn't that I was interviewing people. It was during the Vuelta in 2013, and Cycling Tips, the website in Australia, had asked me if they could put my blog up on their page. And I mean, I had those conversations all the time during stages with riders, and often it's pretty bloody boring. Bike race, we might race for 4 hours, but 3 hours of it is, you're really passing the time. So, I used to enjoy getting around and meeting different people. And, and Chris, I'd obviously seen quite a bit. And then obviously in that race, he went on to win it. And yeah, it was really, really intriguing to talk to him and some of the conversations we had. And one thing I'd always read about him and admired was he really, just was a pretty straight shooter. He was happy to tell you that, yeah, he ate Mars bars and drank Coke and did all that stuff. And I was similar mentality, but the problem was for me, I rode in an Italian team, and that's just not acceptable. In an Italian team, obviously everyone probably does that, but you're not meant to talk about it. You're meant to talk about eating paninis and drinking water. So it was always nice and refreshing to speak to some guys that you could relate to. And I remember Stuart O'Grady once telling me that as the sport cleaned up, change that sort of happened around that time, 2010, 2011, 2012, the older, classier riders would come to the fore, the ones that have been there for a long time and done the work. And talking to Chris, what he went through as a young pro, and then the fact that he was able to hang in there and then finally win a race of the magnitude of the Vuelta at, what was he, 41, it was, to me, it was just a great example of that and a great story. And that's something that also has, given me a fair bit of optimism. I'm now 35 and starting my third sport, but, I feel like I've still got a lot ahead of me. And, I look at Chris and what he did, and I think I can still be at the top for quite a while myself.
You're pretty tough on the body in terms of what you do and how hard you go out. Has your ability to recover changed being, say, 20, 25 and now 35?
I mean, this might sound really arrogant or stupid, but I've never really taken sport that seriously. It's always kind of been a means to an end for me. When I was young and at school, I was, really determined to go to the Olympics, and, rowing just happened to be the sport that I was good at as a kid. And as far as Olympic sports go, I was certainly a better rower than swimmer or runner or soccer player or anything else that I could think about going to the Olympics in. So that was why I stuck with that and, was able to make the team. But I never really had a huge passion for the sport. So I never really committed as much as I definitely could have. And then getting into cycling was, it was sort of a passion, but it also came at a time in my life where you need to get a job and have a career. And I was at university studying finance and economics. And you can go and work in an office or maybe become a sportsman. So cycling became that outlet for me, and I got to sort of that level. But again, I was not really able to really go on with it. And I ultimately stepped away, and I was around 30 then. And at that point, thought, right, well, now I'll go and get a real job, and then discover triathlon, and I really love this, and now I'm obviously got another career and continuing a career in sports. So I actually feel like I'm getting better still, recovering faster, getting fitter, getting stronger. I've always done the work, I've always done the training, I've always done what I'd probably call more exercising as opposed to being too high performance. I always just sort of did enough to get to where I wanted to do, or as my dad would often say, say, to satisfy my ego, whatever I had targeted at the time. Whereas now I'm really determined to be the best I possibly can be, and making a lot more sacrifices and training a lot harder. And I find I'm actually recovering a hell of a lot faster than I did from big efforts when I was younger, because I'm a better athlete now.
You mentioned train a lot harder, making more sacrifices. Weren't you in a race where you were peeing blood?
That was a couple of years ago. That was the first race as a pro, and that was a pretty tough one. I mean, at one point I didn't even know I was going the wrong way. It was a guy that played Australian football, Matt Rogers, from Australian legend in rugby league and rugby union, a dual international player, and he saw me going the wrong way. He said, where are you going, mate? And I didn't even know, and that was luckily in about the last 5K of the run. Turned me around and got me to the finish, but, that's, I guess, something that I've never been good at, is quitting. And I've had a couple of DNFs in this sport now, and they're both times have really sort of stung. And I was able to go back to Nice this year and put that one behind me. And the other one I had was in Bustleton at the end of last year, where I was probably just a bit worn out, a bit too easy just to lay the arms down with the way the race had panned out with cancelling the swim and so forth. So if I want to do something, I'm pretty determined to see it through when I set some goals for myself. And on that particular day, not finishing my first Ironman, I guess I probably showed I would have gone home in an ambulance before that happened. So I was pleased I gutted that one out.
So we're almost we're 9 minutes into this podcast, and we haven't mentioned your Kona performance in 2017. I'm pretty sure that most of the folks who are listening would have a knowledge about it, but you had a really strong swim, an amazing bike ride, and you got on the run, and you were 5 minutes ahead of everybody else. Tell us about that day a little bit. You're probably tired of talking about that day. It's an amazing day. Tell us about that and your strategy last October.
I really need to go back to 2015 when I was having my year sabbatical from sport, and as a brand ambassador for Cannondale and Segoy, and that suggested I have a crack at triathlon, just to keep myself active in case I want to go back to sport at the top level. And that was where I did Oceanside, and that went pretty well, and I really loved it. And so I decided I may as well do Whistler as well, and I did that later in the year and did quite well on my debut there. But then 2 weeks later I broke my foot, and I qualified for Kona as an age grouper, and I remember never being so excited to spend $1,000 in my life. When I went for the roll down slot, and fast forward a week or 2 weeks, and I had a broken foot. And the thing was, I was never not going to go with, even if it was broken. I was ready for it to be broken again. So I went along to Kona, and I hadn't trained obviously because I had a cast on my foot, and got that off sort of 10 days before, and I got through the swim pretty well. I was under an hour actually for the swim when I hadn't swum for months, and blew up on the bike, obviously. I still rode around 4:30 or something, and then sort of shuffled through the run. It was actually less painful to sort of shuffle than it was to try and walk or jog. But I caught all the women bar Daniela. I almost caught her on the bike, and I remember getting off on the run course and just being in that atmosphere of the pro men. I saw them sort of coming back and out of town, and then the women passing me one by one, and the excitement, the motorbikes and the helicopters and the whole shebang. And it was just, I wanted to be there, and I saw Jan coming back along the Queen K when I was heading out. So I got to see him in those last sort of 5K, and, as much as I was in admiration of the athlete that he is, and you look at him, I mean, it's just a specimen and a half, that guy. I saw a guy that I genuinely believed that I could come back and race against. I looked at it, I thought, wow, okay, I really think I can run that fast at that point with some work. And that was all I thought about for that next 15K was, what I was going to do to get back to Kona and race the race, not just participate like I was doing on that particular day. So, the hardest part was qualifying, and I got to that point and, made it just inside the cutoff, and we got to Kona, and, I actually had a terrible swim. It's the worst swim I've ever had in a race as a pro. So I was a long way behind. I got caught by the girls. So I had to get past the women before I even worried about trying to get to the lead of the men's race, and past Lucy about 5K into the bike. And then I thought, great, now I can start thinking about catching Josh. And and then the bike course, I guess, record was, more of a consequence of the circumstances. I'd sort of never been around other athletes before at that point. I generally got in the lead pretty quick in all my races. So I had Lionel and Sebi there. So I thought, well, I'm just going to have to change my tactics here and try and learn as much as possible and follow these guys and just see how it pans out. And so obviously we cruised along and we caught the front. And once we got to Howley, I just noticed the pace really dropped and going up that climb. And I saw Jan looked really shaky on his bike. He didn't look very comfortable. I don't know if he was, out of shape or whatever, wasn't in the form that he normally would be. But I just thought he would look like he was vulnerable. And so as soon as we went around the corner, I really hit the gas more to put pressure on Jan than anything else. I expected Sebi and Lionel to be there with me, and I looked back after 30 seconds a minute, and there was no one there, and I was like, oh, wow, that was a bit of a surprise. So I didn't really want to be on my own, and I could, 5 minutes later, I could sort of see Sebi in the distance. I thought, well, I'll get down this descent and then have a bit of a breather on those first few rollers out of Kauai High and wait for Sebi and have a chat to him and see what's happening back in the field. And hopefully we've blown Jan away and, put him on the ropes. And I wasn't sure about Lionel, but I knew he was not very good at riding his bike. So riding down that hill with the wind was always going to be difficult for him. So I waited for Sebi and then obviously Sebi sort of dropped the pace because he probably needed a breather when he got to me. And we waited for Lionel, and Lionel came to the front and sort of picked it up again. And then we lost Sebi, which I was disappointed about because, Sebi I'm a huge fan of, and always have been. And I said to Fallon, we were driving to Roth, earlier in the year, I was so excited to be racing against him because he's the one that I really followed in the sport as a fan, and the way he raced. And I guess that's someone that I kind of can resonate with in the way I'd like to race or like to be able to race in the future. So I was disappointed to see him, fall away, and Lionel sort of kept the pace going. And then I just saw my heart rate just, dropping and dropping and dropping. I didn't have power that day. Next thing my heart rate was like 120 beats a minute, and I hadn't been that low ever in a race. And I was like, well, come on, and this is a bit ridiculous. This is a race, but not here for a picnic. So I came up past Lionel and just said to him, I said, come on, mate, we've come this far. Let's, keep the pressure on. We've got them on the ropes here, and just sort of continued on the pace. And next thing I was alone. You hear that motorbike behind you, it straight away that when they come in that gap, you've got a gap, and glance back and couldn't see anyone. So that was how I ended up on my own. I had no idea what the time was or how fast we were going or any of that. I was more just enjoying being a part of the race more than anything else, and trying to give myself a chance to finish as high as possible. And then once I started the run, I think that's when I really fell apart, in that I tried to start thinking about winning the race and being clever, taking it easy and thinking, saving my energy for later on, and just didn't get in a good rhythm. People keep telling me about, you go out too hard on the run, you pay for it at the end, blah, 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 blah. And, I'd just come off 2 races where I'd had great runs in both Sweden, where I was second, and Wales, where I won. And this time, stupidly, I just sort of thought, okay, I'll take it easy. It's going to be hot. It's going to be this. It's going to be that. And never got in a rhythm. And it just got worse and worse and worse. And, and in the end, I knew that I couldn't win, and it's a world championship. So if you're not going to win, it really doesn't matter if you come second or third or 15th or 25th, to be honest. So I just, a bit like last time when I first saw Jan on the Queen K, when I had about 15, 16K to go in 2015, I'd just been passed, I think, by Patrick around that mark this time. With around 15K to go, and I knew that was it. So, I had 15K again to plan how I was going to come back next year and, and try and finish it off, try and take it all the way to the finish line. So save your bullets for another battle. And that's been the last 12 months. It's just been a huge focus on Hawaii and getting back there. And, we've got a lot of intel now. We know how that race panned out, and now where I've improved, and, where my rivals have improved. And obviously Jan will come back stronger, and he's a great champion, and it's been really exciting.
So in terms of your racing style, would you say that's more like the movie Talledega Nights, where if you're not first, you're last?
Yeah, well, it's really interesting because during my year out from sport, I actually met Jimmy Johnson, and we've become quite good friends since then, and we often joke about that. And I noticed that when I raced Oceanside, that first, that year, for a bit of fun, I was living in LA, and I just thought, why not? I'll go and have a crack at a triathlon. And I remember starting, way back in the age group. So there's people just everywhere. And I just remember in the swim, I'd be passing like a 60, 70-year-old grandmother or something, and I'd be punching them out of the way. And I felt like a prick, but I was so determined to get to the front. It didn't matter who I had to get past. I was just trying to get through that swim as quickly as possible. And then when I got on the bike, the same thing. I just wanted to go as fast as I could, as hard as I could, to get to the front of the race. And then on the run, I was just, I kind of knew I was, I guess, leading the age group category. So, I was just determined to only get passed by pro women and not see many age group men come past me. And that was a very different mindset for me compared to when I was cycling, where as a domestique, I'd sort of been, pigeonholed into being as a support rider in big races and even the smaller ones that you're not worrying about winning yourself. Yeah, you do the job for the team, but, you get to, that was it. I got to, 30, 31, 32, whatever I was. And I didn't want my life to be defined by, not that I'm not a team player, but just being there to help others. I felt like I had more to offer the world, and I thought that would probably be more in business or in TV. A couple of other different things that I'd done over that time I suggested I could be good at. And here I was in a triathlon, and I had that hunger, and then I took that to Whistler in that Ironman, and I remember it was the first time I'd worn a wetsuit or tried Vaseline. That's right, because I chafed had really bad chafing in Oceanside. I didn't know about Vaseline. Put it all over myself before the start, but then obviously when I put my goggles on, put it all over my lenses too. So I'm swimming out at the start, couldn't see where I was going. Anyway, start went, and I started swimming in the wrong direction, and so I just threw the goggles off and did the entire swim without goggles. And nothing was going to stop me. I just wanted to get to the front, and I guess I've taken that into the pro ranks. I mean, obviously I do races now where I'm training, but when I'm there to race, when I'm there to compete and get a result, it's just everything to win it. I mean, that's the only thing that matters. That's why you race. I'm not there to do a personal best. I'm there to win. So, yeah.
Do you get, with your prowess of especially being a cyclist, do you get a lot of advice that from folks that say you should focus on one sport, and do you get a lot of unsolicited advice? My guess is you do.
Yeah, I mean, of course, over the years, I've certainly had a fair bit of everyone's a bit of an expert, aren't they? And especially when you do well, everyone becomes more of an expert or wants to help you. And yeah, I mean, I guess with regards to the actual sport of triathlon, people telling you to back off on the bike and you'll run faster and this and that and everything else. And what people don't realise is that I don't know of any other person that I'm racing against that has the same background as I have. So, I mean, I don't think you can really compare the way that, say, a traditional triathlete would prepare for something to the way I would. We tried backing off on the bike and in the hope of running faster. It just doesn't work for me. Actually, I'm a hell of a lot worse. The best I've ever run is when I've had my best bike splits. And it's because I feel like I'm racing. I need to be out there and I need to be racing. I'm there to race. I'm not there to, as I said, do a personal best. I mean, I'm there to go as fast as I possibly can. So, but certainly now, I think the way I've been able to chop and change between sports, it's interesting. I actually get more people now suggesting perhaps you could do a combination of things, in the future. I mean, that's something I've always felt is possible. I mean, there's a lot of people. I mean, you got Mark and Dave that have won 6 Konas. You got Lance has won 7 tours, and Merckx and your Indurains have won 5 tours. Froome's won 4. You've got Steve Redgrave who's won 5 Olympic gold medals in rowing. I mean, I'm never going to do any of that. But maybe one day I could be the first that's been successful in quite a few sports. And that's something that really drives me. And I guess now it's interesting that what I've been able to do in triathlon, the way I've come into this, people are now actually believing in that. We even had quite a bit of time with Per Lundström down there at Red Bull, discussing exactly this and plans forward and what potentially is possible and from a physiological point of view and what you could chop and change between. And that's something else that really motivates me, to just be a really the best athlete I can possibly be and apply that to anything.
And you mentioned Chris Froome on that earlier, and I don't think there's anybody else racing triathlons that's training with him like you do. How's that training with a guy like that? That's got to be a hard day or holds hard series of days. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really just been a amazing evolution over the past 18, 19 months down, and it's all down to Tim Kerrison. 20 months. I was home in Australia last Christmas, beginning of 2017, and he was just talking to Richie Port, and Richie was, in great shape, and he was at the Tour Down Under, and Tim had asked him what he'd been up to, and Richie said, "Oh, Wurf's been home from the US, and we've been riding together, and we've even been doing a bit of swimming together." And Tim was, he wasn't really even sure that I was still doing sport. I mean, we talked about me going to Team Sky quite a few times in my career, and when I wanted to go, they didn't have a place, and when they wanted me there, I already had a contract. It just never really worked out. They had a guy there. They had Froome, who was in Australia training at Tim's place at Mount Tamborine up on the Sunshine, up on the Gold Coast, and he had a teammate there who got called into the Tour Down Under at the last minute because one of their other riders got sick, and we joked about this the other day. I've just come back from a camp with the team in Chatel in the Alps. I was actually there with Mikhail Kwiatkowski and Pavel Sivakov and Salvatore Puccio getting ready for the Vuelta. And so it's not just Froome that I train with in the team, it's obviously everyone. But one of the other guys was sick, and so Chris was all of a sudden alone for 2 weeks training on the Gold Coast. And Tim, just being Tim, thought, oh, well, Wurfy's been training with Richie down in Tassie. Maybe he'll come up and train with Chris on the Gold Coast to give him some company. And so I got this call at 10 o'clock that night. I was in bed, and he said, you want to come up? And at first I said, I've got some stuff on the next couple of days and I'll be up. I got off the phone and Fallon said, you call him straight back and you tell him you'll be there in the morning. And so I dropped me off at the airport and off I went to the Gold Coast. And and that was, I was ready that was it for me. Sport was done. I was going to go back to the US and probably get a job in finance somewhere or doing something else. And had 10 days with Chris, and we found out that I could still ride a bike. And Chris, even one day we did 5 hours and Chris did a 21k trail run with me because Tim thought, why not? Chris is going to ride. If I go to ride with Chris, I may as well make Chris do some running with me. And then during that time, Tim just sort of said, if you're keen to have a real crack at this, we're happy to support you, and you can, do some camps with the team and bring in our expertise. So next week he took me down to Tim was a swimming physiologist at the Olympics for the Australian Olympic team and then the British Olympic team before he went to Team Skies. The guy he worked with, has coached the world record holder for the mile in the pool for the last, 20 years, Grant Hackett. Took me down for swimming lessons with Sun Yang. And, so all of a sudden I've had 10 days training with Chris Froome, and then I spent a week swimming with Sun Yang. So it was a pretty unexpected turn of events, and really just kick-started this whole, new focus on a sport. And maybe, the fact that I was just even able to be in those sessions with those guys at that level and survive and then show improvement made me believe, I think I can really do something in this sport. Yeah, I've spent a hell of a lot of time with Chris all through last year. I mean, he hasn't, until the tour, he hadn't lost the Grand Tour since he'd been training with me. Not that was anything to do with me, but, it's been a great run, and obviously I've had some good success as well. So we've really enjoyed sharing that together. And then Geraint Thomas, we talked about, I'd obviously been on camps with him and talked about training in LA and how much I love that. And he said, well, can we do a camp there in January? So it was meant to be the three of us. And obviously Chris had some issues earlier in the year. And so it was just G and I, and Tim Kerrison came over too. And it was meant to be 10 days. And G was training so well, and the team was so happy with it that he extended another 10 days. So we ended up having a bit over 3 weeks there, in January, just training in Malibu on my roads. And G went on and won the tour. It was the biggest change he'd had in his calendar. He'd run the Tour Down Under in Australia for the last 10 years and wanted to do something different. So it's been an incredible, being around those guys just gives you a huge amount of belief, and really pushes me. And I think Tim feels that it kind of pushes them in some way, because often I'll do what they do and then he'll send me off to go swimming or running. And particularly in LA with G, we'd always finish our rides at Peddler's Fork in Calabasas. My mate Robbie Schaefer and my best mate, great guy, and loves cycling obviously. And we'd finish there, and or after sort of 4 or 5 hours doing whatever we're doing, and G was staying over in the Palisades. And so I was staying with Robbie. So Tim would be like, okay, Cameron, you go and do this run or this swim or whatever. And so G would always go the long way home, knowing that I was doing something else. So every day G was doing 6-7 hours for 3 weeks, and hopefully that Tim sort of indicated that base is really giving him a good foundation to obviously go on and win the Tour de France that he just won a few weeks back. So it's been a great relationship for me, the team, not just Chris. Certainly started with Chris, and I'm off to train with Chris again next week, a couple of weeks in Nice before I head back to the States. And it's great to have them in your corner. It's really quite amazing how it's all transpired in the last 20 months. And it's all down to Tim Kerrison and his vision. I mean, that guy's just a genius, isn't he? I mean, you look at his track record. And I mean, the year I won Worlds in rowing under 23s, the year before his crew had won Worlds, and one of the guys in that crew ended up rowing with me at the Olympics. So we've got a long history together. It's pretty amazing how through cycling, them trying to get me on the team and it never worked out. And now here I am, quite entrenched in their setup. I've been, on 3 or 4 or 5 team camps this year, and not to mention the fact that I'm, always with guys here in Andorra, or if I'm down in Nice or Monaco training with the guys there too. It's really quite special, and I think something that helps me, train harder and harder every day, being around guys like that, for sure.
Do you ever envision next year, 2 years from now, figuring out a place to get back on one last run in a Grand Tour?
I mean, it's certainly been discussed. We actually talked about that this year, and Kona kind of changed a lot. I mean, up until Kona, that was, what we're sort of talking about, because I was figured, well, it's great training for me to do some racing. And then after Kona, my bike leg's fine. I really need to learn to swim and run. And the only reason I'm good at cycling is because I've ridden my bike a hell of a lot and raced a lot. And I need to commit some time to swimming and running to have that more consistent. So this year, for me personally, I didn't feel like I could afford to go to a bike race and crash and hurt myself and not be able to swim for a week, or break a collarbone or whatever, or get some road rash and not be able to run properly. So, I've been really happy focusing on this year and trying to get much more solid swimming and running. And I might even take another year to do that, because I want to be really good at this sport. And I definitely feel that racing on the road will give me another element at some point, but that's not where I need to focus at the moment. I need to focus in other areas. But yeah, obviously it's part of the plan and something we've discussed. And as I said, I just really trust him. He's just been great for me. And if he doesn't know something, he gets in the best people. We've had the guys from Nike that did the Breaking Food project, Brett Kirby, who's been fantastic and helping us out with, obviously running's the one thing we're not super up with. And her in at Red Bull, just always there to help in any possible way he can. And I just got the best network I could ever dream of. I always dreamed as a triathlete this is what you'd want, and I just can't believe that I've actually got that. And of course, the swimming with Sun Yang, and then even last week, Tim had a friend of his who's an open water expert coach from the UK, Sean Kelly, actually came to the team Sky Camp to help me swim. So I was swimming with him in the morning, and then riding with the guys, and then doing my runs. One day there, Mikhail had just finished the Tour of Poland, which he won, and he flew in that morning, and we were out running, and we always have our live location on the WhatsApp, on the group chat. So Mikhail thought, I'll go for a ride, see where Cameron and Tim are. He didn't realise Tim was following me while I was running. So next thing you're looking up the bike, up this running trail, it's gravel, and here comes the Polish national champion. I said to Tim, look at this guy in the Polish champion jersey, thinking someone was a super fan of Kwiato, and it was him. He didn't even say, oh gosh, you're doing this, and go off and do his own thing. He just followed me for 10k, and chatted to Tim and chatted to me, and that's a pretty amazing setup, really. I couldn't dream of having it any better, to be honest. It's a great team to be involved with.
You were out early this year. You were out in Big Bear in Southern California getting altitude training. Tell us a little bit about that and how that training went, and what the result of that was.
Yeah, well, I love Big Bear. I'm a huge fan of the boxing, big fan of Triple G, and we've got a good relationship with the guys at Hublot, and he's one of their sponsors, and then Mayweather, of course, and they've all spent a lot of time up there, and that's how I learned about Big Bear. So last year before Kona, I went there for my final little altitude top up, and I'd actually been there for one camp when I was cycling, I think back in 2014, and just love it. And so this year, the option was to come to Europe and go to a camp with the guys at altitude in Tenerife, or I said to Tim, I wouldn't mind going to Big Bear because I can, the running is, I think, could be quite good up there, being flat. And so that was really the big focus there this time. And also with Fallon, I drag her all over the world, and she loves the skiing. And I thought, this might be, I can actually kind of train, and she can ski at that time of the year. So that was pretty cool. Some days I'd be out on the road and she'd be up on the slopes. And so, the family could not be too burdened by my selfish choices to be an athlete. And I really focused on probably my running in that block. I'd actually planned to do the LA Marathon, and I was actually running I ran 37k one week and then 42 the next, and got a bit of a niggle in my knee, and was a bit nervous about running. So I ran a marathon in training. Was a bit nervous about running on the pavement with that downhill run, particularly, and getting injured as I was building up for the Ironman in South Africa. But I think that block was really great for me because my running this year has been so much more consistent. Even my bad runs have been a hell of a lot faster. You compare Kona, where I ran 3:19, 3:20 or whatever, to say South Africa, where I did really fell apart with nutrition and whatever else went wrong, and I still was able to do 3:05, which still keeps me pretty competitive with a hard bike. The running at altitude has really made me much more efficient at moving because you just don't have the air, you just can't waste the oxygen. But above all, about Big Bear, is it just really inspires me. That, as I said, I'm a huge fan of boxing and what those athletes put themselves through in the UFC. And I love to surround myself with the best people or in the best environments. And when I'm there, I just really feel like I'm really doing something. I really feel like I'm there to work and, just really having a go. There's something special about that place. And I'm going back there, of course, before Kona again this year. And we're going to follow a pretty similar build-up. Yeah, I love it up there. LA has become for sure, and everywhere around LA, San Diego and everywhere, just like a big second home for me. I love the area.
And right now, you're training in Andorra, Gold Coast, Los Angeles. Those aren't some bad zip codes.
Yeah, no, pretty lucky. I've followed an endless summer since I stopped cycling about 3 years ago, 4 years ago nearly now. And I think that's a big part of it too. I mean, I don't really miss days training. I'm always in good weather. And I mean, you can use an ergo and a home trainer, kicker, Wahoo kick or whatever, and the treadmill, of course. But those things are great. And I mean, they're really important tools. When used properly, you can really improve you physiologically and obviously maximize your time that you've got. And there's a huge amount to be said for, on the ergo where you're constantly having the pressure on the pedals. And I use it religiously, at least once every 10 days, a good solid session, sort of 4 hours to just keep the legs having the memory, not even necessarily pedaling hard, but just constantly pedaling, which is what it's like in a race, particularly a course like Kona. But it doesn't help you with how to ride fast, feeling the road, when to accelerate, when to back off, how to take corners, what your heart rate does in different wind, different heat, different cold, all that sort of stuff. So, I've found that being in good weather or at least climates where I can train all the time and train properly, which, outside, I guess if you listen to anything, really interested in Mark Allen and shamanism and things that he talks about there. And I mean, you're just happier outside. I mean, that's where the body was designed to function. You're not designed to just work on a machine. So, yeah, I mean, yeah, it's happened to end up being Andorra and, spent a lot of time in Nice and the Gold Coast and Tassie, of course, when I'm actually at home. That's actually my home. And yeah, I'm always out and about and able to do some really good work. And that's really important, particularly in this sport.
First of all, thank you so much for your time and contacting us from Andorra. My goodness. But I would be remiss if I didn't end the. You have a finance and economics degree, and I would love, as a professional cyclist, as a professional triathlete, what's your point of view being a professional athlete and how the finance and the money flows relative to cycling and/or triathlon? How many when you start looking, for instance, at professional tennis and you go way deep down the stack, there's a lot of folks making seven figures. That's not as true in cycling. It's certainly not as true as triathlon. How does a good triathlete make a living? How does a professional triathlete make a living in the sport?
This is something that I've really had to obviously learn because it's another sport now that I'm trying to make money. And unfortunately, coming from cycling, you used to being paid pretty well, even at a basic level. So you don't really accept nothing. And I think one of the biggest problems the sport's got itself into is a lot of the athletes are prepared to take very little because the bigger athletes are prepared to take not very much. So it just drives everything down. And I've been just so fortunate with Team Sky and Carson Jefferson, who's in charge of all their partnerships and relationships. And obviously, as everyone's well aware, I'm using all the same stuff. When he's gone to negotiate those deals and they've come back with their offers, he's said, well, we've had some collateral being the team. And he's just said, look, that's just not right. And being able to negotiate some good deals for me. And that's something that at some point, I'm trying to find the platform. I need to talk to, the other guys and I guess, more the guys that are sort of controlling the market about how do we, improve that across the board for everyone so that people aren't selling themselves way too short, giving themselves a chance to actually make something from the sport, because otherwise, they're just surviving. And sadly, when they stop, that makes life really difficult for them. So yeah, triathlon particularly, I mean, it's compared to cycling. If you want to compare it to cycling, you maybe if you had the top 30 pros in cycling, would maybe match the budget of the bottom world tour team. Budget. You'd have a couple of really well paid guys, a few pretty well paid guys, and then 15 to 20 guys that are sort of getting by, and that's just not good enough because there's a huge amount of brands in the sport, massive participation. The people really follow the top athletes. They're really interested in what they use and what they do. I mean, I get a huge amount of inquiries about everything that I use and so forth. And I mean, I really think as a collective, as athletes, we need to sort of work together. I'm sure the brands won't be too happy about that because they feel like they can just offer whatever the hell they want and you'll accept it. Not that I've been to be one to stand up, but I haven't done it just to say F you. It's more, guys, you can't, that is not an offer. I mean, a lot of the comments has been, would you pay someone in your front office that much money to work for you? You're asking me to work for you, promote your stuff, promote your brand. Would you seriously expect someone to work full time in your office for that amount of money? And yeah, they don't like it, but they need the athletes to promote their brand. And at the moment, we need to find a way for the athletes to really stand up for themselves and get a bit more out of the sport because they put a lot into it.
Well, Cam, I have to tell you, we really appreciate you coming on. thank you again for joining us at California Triathlon Soup. And I'm absolutely sure that as you're laser focused on your race in October at Kona, we'll be following you, and I hope to see you very soon in Southern California.
Thanks for having me. And yeah, absolutely. As I said, California's has been a massive part of this whole journey for me. And not wanting to sound sentimental, I owe a huge amount to the people of particularly SoCal, where I spend a huge amount of my time training and racing and preparing. And I'm a huge advocate for the area. I tell everyone how great it is. And like G, came out and prepared for his Tour de France victory there. So hopefully I'll get some more of the guys out there going forward and increase the excitement around not only triathlon, but swimming, biking, and running, and sport in general in that wonderful little state. We're bloody lucky to have it.
That was Cam Wurf here on California Triathlon Soup. Again, thanks, Cam, and good luck for the rest of your season.